Nide prakasito Divya Gyan Nide prakasito Prema Bhakti Jahate Avirya Vinasarate Prema Bhakti Jahate Avirya Vinasarate Vedika Jahara Karita Vedika Jahara Karita Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajnara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajnara Bandhu Lokina Lokira Devana Lokina Lokira Devana Prabhu Kora Daya Deyo Mohit Parachaya 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 Ebeja Krishna Tripurvana Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavani Pasyatare Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki.
consider it a fault to sit on the Vyasa sign while they were reciting the prayer. A discrepancy. Don't worry, it's not going to be longer kirtan. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Jasonanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Manashari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupai Paramahamsa Parivraj Jaya Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Pramanandi. All glories to the Summa devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Aknanantamirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhyarev Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 3, Verse 25. No purport. Translation. Then Hiranyakashipu did his demoniac austerities, and now he's getting the fruit of that austerity in the form of the appearance of Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma has just appeared. So then, the translation of the verse, getting up from the ground and seeing Lord Brahma before him, the head of the Daityas was overwhelmed by jubilation, because now his sense gratification program is about to pay through. We also will be overwhelmed with jubilation. With tears in his eyes, his whole body shivering, he began praying in a humble mood, with folded hands and a faltering voice, to satisfy Lord Brahma. Anyway, next verse. Sri Hiranyakashipu Vacha Kalapante Kalashishtena Nyantena Tamasavritam Abhivyadna Jagadidam Swayan Jyoti Sarochisha. Kalpante Kalashrishena Yandena Tamasabritam Abhivyakna Jagadidam Swayan Jyoti Sarochisha Kalapante Kalashrishena Yandena Tamasavartam Abhivyana Jagadidham Sayanjoti Sarotrisha Kalpante Kalashishena Yandena Tamasavritam Abhivyana Jagadidham Sayan Jyoti Saroj. Mothers, mother. Kalpante Kalashrishtena Yandena Tamasavitam Vivekna Jagadidam Sayan Jyoti Saroj. There's another verse. Atmanam Trivrata Chaitam Shridyapati Numpati Raja Sattva Tamo Dhamne Paraya Mahate Namaha. Sri Hiranyakashipu Vacha. Hiranyakashipu said, Kalpa Ante, at the end of every day of Lord Brahma, Kala Shishnena, created by the time factor, Yah, he who, Andena, by dense darkness, Tamasa, by ignorance, Avritam, covered, Abhivyanak, manifested, Jagat, cosmic manifestation, Idam, this, Swayam Jyoti, self-effulgent, Swaruchisha, by his bodily rays, etc. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord within this universe. At the end of each day of his life, the universe is fully covered with dense darkness by the influence of time. And then again, during his next day, the self-effulgent Lord, by his own effulgence, manifests, maintains, and destroys the entire cosmic manifestation through the material energy, which is invested with the three modes of material nature. He, Lord Brahma, is the shelter of those modes of nature, Sattva Guna, Raja Guna, and Tamaguna. Purport. The words Abhivekna Jagadidam refer to He who creates this cosmic manifestation. The original creator is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Janmadyasya Yataha. Lord Brahma is the secondary creator. When Lord Brahma is empowered by Lord Krishna as the engineer to create the phenomenal world, he becomes a supremely powerful feature within this universe. The total material energy is created by Krishna, and later taking advantage of all that has necessarily been created, in other words, the ingredients of the material nature. Lord Brahma engineers the entire phenomenal universe. At the end of Lord Brahma's day, everything up to Swargaloka is inundated with water. And the next morning, when there is darkness in the universe, Brahma again brings the phenomenal manifestation into existence. Therefore, he is described here as he who manifests this universe. Trin Gunan Vrinoti. Lord Brahma takes advantage of the three modes of material nature. Prakriti, material nature, is described here as Trivrita, the source of the three material modes. Srila Madhvacharya comments in his connection that Trivrita means Prakritya. Thus, Lord Krishna is the original creator, and Lord Brahma is the original engineer. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu appears to be manifesting symptoms of humility, etc. But that's not possible for him because he's on the platform of sense enjoyment. So the real spiritual form of humility can only manifest in relationship to an infinite entity by which one can realize their own infinitesimalness. Does it make sense? It's common sense. Unless that's the spiritual form of humility. It can only manifest in relationship. That means there has to be a realization of the infinite, the absolute truth. Either is Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, but there should be a realization of the infinite. Then that time, realizing your own infinitesimalness in relationship to that entity, you become humbled naturally. Just like one may stand at the shoreline of the ocean and feel oneself humbled to some degree. But then you can just make an airplane and fly over it, right? So then you think, I've conquered over the material nature. Someone may become deluded like that because the ocean is not actually infinite. So only when there's a realization of the infinite can the spiritual form of humility actually manifest. By that perception or realization, one realizes one's own infinitesimalness, they become humble. And such a humble person is necessarily beyond all competitive worldliness. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta states this in his essay, Channers of the Kirtan of Hari. And giving his purport to Trinadapi Sunichena, he says that the really, truly humble person is necessarily the beyond all competitive worldliness. And therefore, only such a person has the right to admonish all of those who are actually not humble, by dint of the definition which we've just described. Chastise. So the so-called humility that manifests in relationship to one another on the material world, on the material platform, basically just becomes a mutual admiration society of dupes. Another expression of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. You know, because the respect is first of all, not the mutual admiration society of dupes. The word dupes means to trick someone, to deceive them in a clever sort of way. It's called being duped. Just like when I was in Vrindavan, I got duped really good. When I first got in Vrindavan, we wanted to go to some place that was near Lohi Bazaar. And it was just like maybe a 10-minute, maybe a 15-minute rickshaw drive. And so me and one other devotee, we were both ignorant, very ignorant. And we got one rickshaw driver, and he said very confidently, 300 rupees, like very casually. Actually, the real ride is only going to be costing like maybe 20 rupees at most, the distance we were going. But he just said it very like 300 rupees. Like it would cost there, and then he would take us back another 300 rupees, you know? So we didn't know any better, we were ignorant. So he said it very like, just matter of fact, like he was older, seemed very innocent in the face. 300 rupees, like that, very casually. So we gave 300 rupees there, 300 rupees coming back. Then the next day, we asked another person, another rickshaw driver, and he was like 100 rupees. What? Like both 100 rupees one way and 100 rupees another way, you know? So then we realized we got duped really bad, you know? Then I just said, better to just walk and keep my money. So this is called being duped. It means being deceived in a very clever sort of way. So this is what happens in the material world. It becomes a mutual admiration society of dupes. Dupes means a person is ignorant. That's why he gets duped. So someone glorifies you for something, and then you glorify them for something, and you're basically just augmenting one another's ignorance, like this. And then that's considered appreciation or a humbleness in relation. But humbleness cannot be there unless there's a realization of the absolute in a true sense. Then the so-called respect is just offered to the material body. Just like when Daksha came into the yajna, there was one yajna that was about to go on, and Shiva didn't offer his obeisances. So he felt very offended by that. So then Lord Shiva, not speaking to him, but later on speaking to his wife, was explaining that the real humbleness is actually offered to the respect, the obeisances, is actually offered to the super soul. It's not offered to the material body. Prabhupada even comments that's why the spiritual master will offer obeisances to his own disciple, because the respect is offered to the super soul within the body. So then, in other words, in order to respect someone on the true platform, offering respect to a material body, and it's not actually respect. It becomes a mutual admiration society of dupes. Of course, Lord Brahma is not duped by his foolishness, but there is some obligation because some austerity was performed in his name. So there is some obligation, so he's come before Hiranyakashipu. And now Hiranyakashipu seems to be offering some humble words in glorification of Lord Brahma. But actually, he's just duping himself. Lord Brahma isn't duped, he's enlightened, but there is some obligation. So Lord Brahma has appeared before Hiranyakashipu, and now he's offering some words, apparent words of glorification. But here you can see he doesn't understand the tattva. There is some confusion. Earlier we heard in the previous chapter, Hiranyakashipu speaking Atma Tattva very nicely. So then we were thinking, wow, he's speaking like an enlightened person. But actually knowledge of the Atma is just knowledge in the mode of goodness. Krishna clearly says this in the 25th chapter of the 11th canto. Knowledge of the difference between matter and spirit is just knowledge in the mode of goodness. Therefore, in the Gyan Marg and the Yoga Marg, really that process is just about augmenting goodness. And when you augment goodness to a very high degree, then what happens is the Vidya Shakti of Maya gives you the perception of Atma's autonomous nature from matter. Like that. So Krishna says very clearly, knowledge of the soul is just knowledge in the mode of goodness. Whereas knowledge about me is transcendental. So because knowledge of Krishna is on the, we will call this superconscious platform. The word supra means transcending. So knowledge of Krishna and Krishna's world and everything that relates to the spiritual reality is supraconscious. It means it's transcending our ordinary jurisdiction of consciousness. And therefore it can only be known by disclosure from that realm. Therefore the statements like Bhakti Amam Abhijananti, only by Bhakti you can know Krishna. Why only by Bhakti you can know Krishna? Because Bhakti is also part of that realm. It's also part of the superconscious realm. So that Bhakti comes down, it becomes one with one's being. This is described like this in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then the Samvit Shakti within Bhakti gives the perception of that reality. Then you can know Krishna. Like this. So because of that, you can see Hiranyakashipu doesn't have that understanding. He had understanding of Atma Tattva. He spoke that very nicely. So many of us were appreciating if we had just heard that little portion, like if we didn't hear about how he was killing devotees and so on, you know, we would have thought that he was like nicely situated. And, you know, definitely we would invite him to give a Bhagavatam class. No doubt, no doubt. If we just heard that section, we would say, you know, on the list, Jai Jagannath one day, Nityananda Prabhu another, Hiranyakashipu. Definitely we would invite him to give a class, just with that Atma Tattva understanding, no doubt. But he doesn't know Krishna Tattva, Paramatma, because that's transcending the normal jurisdiction of consciousness. And it hasn't been disclosed to him because he, even if it was spoken to him at some point, without Gyane Prayasam Udapasya, Namanta Eva, without throwing out one's worldly experience and the understanding based on one's worldly experience, you can't actually hear from anyone. Hearing requires a little detachment, otherwise you can't hear. I think in the last class I gave here, Krishna Prabhu asked me, what are the qualifications for hearing? We quoted one verse, it's coming from the Chandogya Upanishad, and one of the qualifications is detachment, a little detachment required to hear. Just like I've been reading to a lot of you the last 2 days, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, after 40 years, I have not found even one sincere person. 40 years of preaching, I have not found even one sincere person. And then he describes the reason why. He said, in one moment I speak Harikatha, and in the next moment, they're unable to relinquish their dependence on their own understanding, intelligence, and phenomenal experience. Therefore, I have not even seen one sincere person. Like that, of course, that's not fully the case, but it just goes to show you the rarity of being able to hear properly. So definitely, Hiranyakashipu hasn't heard the tattva. So there's a little bit of confusion in his statements here. The point that's being brought out here in the purport by Srila Prabhupada, remember Lord Brahma is directing this, or Hiranyakashipu is directing his statements towards Lord Brahma. So here he's saying that Lord Brahma is the supreme Lord within this universe. That actually can be true in a proper context. And Prabhupada is describing what that context is. The Supreme Lord, Paramatma, he manifests all the ingredients of material nature. And Lord Brahma is the first entity who engineers the material world. So it means he takes those ingredients already manifested and then he designs them in a particular way according to the karma of the jivas. So in a sense, as the first living entity and the engineer of the universe, in a certain context, he can be said to be supreme within this universe. But then he goes on to event some of his confusion by saying that Lord Brahma is the shelter of the three modes of material nature. Actually, he's not the shelter. He's only using the three modes of material nature to engineer the universe. The actual shelter is the Supreme Lord. He says that in Bhagavad Gita, referring to Maya as Mahabrahma, he mentions himself as the shelter of the material nature as well as the entities, the seed-giving father of all the entities in this world, Paramatma. So there's some confusion concerning the tattva because he hasn't heard actual Krishna tattva from bona fide sources. So in this way, he glorifies Lord Brahma falsely. Let me see if there's any other point. Yeah, this is the main point that is made here. The Supreme Lord is the actual creator of the ingredients, just like this joke is there, where many devotees tell this. I don't like to use this one so much, but they tell it like, this is still a good one though, where the scientist, there's some, I guess it's some like comic thread or something, where the scientist is going up to God and said, okay, we don't need you anymore, we got it covered. You know, we've made so much advancement in our science. And so God is like, oh really? Yes, we got it covered, we got it, holding it down. We don't need you anymore. So then God said, okay, so create life. So immediately the scientist starts grabbing all the ingredients. And then God says, wait a minute, that belongs to me too. You got to create from your own energy. Well, I think that's mentioned here. Yeah, from your own energy you should be able to manifest it. But he doesn't have his own energy, the scientist. So, so in the same way, Lord Brahma is not an independent position. His is a delegated power. Prabhupada says here, when Lord Brahma is empowered by Lord Krishna as an engineer to create the phenomenal world, he becomes supremely powerful feature within this universe. So even the context by which one may conceivably or arguably refer to him as a Supreme Lord, that position is a delegated power. It is not his position, it's the position of the Supreme Lord delegated to him to a certain degree by which he's empowered in that way. So being unable to recognize that delegation, you're offering the position of God to the delegated power. And that way you evince your confusion. And the nature of that confusion is offense. Of course, in Hiranyakashipu's case, the offense is going to manifest in a very heavy way. In the case of like ordinary bhaktas like us, it will manifest as the second offense, for example, where you're equating the demigods to Krishna's position. Now understanding the tattva by hearing from sadhu, then one gives a position of the Supreme Lord to a delegated power, and you create aparad, retarding one's growth towards the absolute truth. And the only way out of that aparat, just FYI by the way, is you got to hear the tattva from a sadhu. That's Sri Vishwanath says that very clearly. And in fact, after that, he speaks about the offense of the Vedas. And the next 6 offenses he doesn't speak about. He says, getting out of that, you follow a similar sequence, which is basically hearing the tattva from sadhu, like that. So without hearing that, then there's some confusion. And the position of Shakti is offered to, of Shakti mind, the possessor of Shakti, is offered to Shakti. Then you create offense. The offense is basically you try to exploit. That's the basic offense. Just like now, the material world is the Shakti of Krishna. It belongs to Krishna. It's not the Shakti of the living entity. And therefore, not understanding the relationship between Shakti and Shakti mind, then you manifest the offense of trying to exploit the Shakti for your own purposes. That's an offense, no doubt. That's definitely an offense. And then that exploitation manifests itself as the environmental issues, and then from those issues, other issues come up. Okay, we need resources, so then it manifests as war. It becomes a domino effect of disasters because of not recognizing the Shakti mind. And therefore, in order to use the Shakti, there's a certain protocol, minimally. The minimum protocol was expressed in Karma Kandya Vedic literature, like a minimum protocol to regulate. I was going to say relegate, but I think relegate works too. Relegate and regulate the exploiting tendency of the jiva. And that also involves understanding relationship to some degree between God and his Shaktis. It's not like there's no discussion about it, even in the Karma Kandya literatures. It's not explicitly underscored, but it has to be there, otherwise a tendency to exploit. At least you understand that there is some delegated agent above you whom you have to propitiate in order to use a particular Shakti. That's called demigod worship, in other words. At least that much is understood to some degree. Otherwise, you become like Hiranyakashipu. You definitely become a demon and you exploit. And this way, one becomes fallen. He explains some other points about the universal manifestation, how at the end of Lord Brahma's day, at the end of Lord Brahma's night, there's destruction. At the beginning of his day, there's manifestation again by Lord Brahma. These are some things that many of you may already be familiar with. If not, going through all the details now will be a little bit boring, so I'll not do that now. But he's mentioning some other points that pertain specifically to Lord Brahma. But as far as the points that Prabhupada is bringing up in his purport that I can appreciate, I've described. Any questions? All right. I saw Luke's hand first because he raised it earlier. And then.
Hare Krishna. On the point of offering obeisances to the super soul, this is interesting. We understand the super soul is all pervading. So how is it that we are
you just
only
lie on the ground
only
all day?
Yeah. Well, how is it? What's the significance of offering obeisances to the super soul that happens to be manifest within a particular body versus super soul that's all within every atom?
There isn't any difference actually. Therefore, when Lord Shiva was meditating, he was already offering obeisances to the super soul. Therefore, there was no obligation to offer to Daksha. But the thing is, when you're not having that realization, then as a practice in our normal social interactions, and Krishna has also mentioned this in the 29th chapter of the 11th canto, as the best way of realizing the absolute, that you just actually do the act of offering obeisances, recognizing the position of soul and super soul within the entity. That's to help us, because the tendency, Krishna describes in the 29th chapter, the tendency is for envy and competition, etc., amongst the conditioned souls. So as a practice that's a healthy practice, in Krishna's opinion. That's the Bhakti Yoga chapter, by the way. So he doesn't speak it as his main point, but it's as an auxiliary sort of practice. You may offer obeisances in that way to help you acknowledge.
So also we understand worship of the devotee is superior to worship of the Lord.
Yeah.
So it seems there's a necessity to recognize and worship one who's actually attained pure devotional service, not just thinking, I'm offering obeisances to the super soul and just kind of forgetting the fact that the devotee's actual qualification is present.
Yeah, that's true. The Bhakta is, of course, in one sense, he's in another ontological category altogether. At least in the very outset of Lord Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhaktas as well as Guru is put in the same ontological category as the Supreme Lord himself. In other words, they're part of the supraconscious realm as well. And therefore, they are also equally worshipable as the Supreme Lord, or even more so. But again, you still got to understand the tattva. You have to understand how that is the case. Otherwise, what happens when there's confusion, as in the case of Hiranyakashipu, and Maharaj was also mentioning in response to my question the other day, you may think no need for God. Therefore, in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, when glorifying Satsanga, he's saying that only by Satsanga you can get everything. No need for anything else. Just by this Satsanga you'll get everything. But then right after that he says, this does not mean that you shouldn't do the other angas of bhakti. Just to make that clarification. It's just to underscore the glory which may tend to be eclipsed by our phenomenal experience. So just to underscore that, especially with Vaishnavas, it would have to be underscored repeatedly because of the tendency to view them from the material point of view. So like this, you're right. Yeah. Okay.
Krishna, I have two questions. My first question is on this point about real humility being born of having an experience of the unlimited absolute. And
that's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta statement.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
from
point.
Shikshashtakam.
It also, I was also going to say it goes very well with the third verse of Shikshashtakam. And so we understand also that realization of the absolute works in gradations according to our advancement. My question is, in the second verse of Shikshashtakam, when the devotee prays that I'm so unfortunate that I have
That's
no
also
taste for
humility, but it's not the fully spiritual form of it.
Right. So my question is what aspect of the greatness of the holy name has the intelligence of the devotee captured to awaken this sort of humility? How do I, as an aspiring devotee, also aspire to have, what aspect of the greatness of the holy name do I also aspire to understand so that such humility can also awaken within me?
Okay, the Bhagavatam says more simply, Bhakti Paresha Anubhavo Viraktir Anyatra Chaisha Trika Ekakala Prapadyamanasha Yatashnata Shush Tushti Pushti Kshurapayonugasam. That devotion, experience of the Absolute, all the way to the apex of experience of actually seeing Him face to face and engaging in pastimes. And Virakti, these three things happen simultaneously from one progressing on the path of surrender. In the same way that nourishment, satisfaction, and detachment from hunger manifest for a person eating. So Sri Vishwanath comments very simply and beautifully, if you take a little bit of grain, then you get a little bit of satisfaction, a little bit of nourishment, a little bit of freedom from hunger. If you take nicely, Bengali style, with practically the whole plate is rice, and a little dal tube in the middle, then you get full satisfaction, full nourishment, and full freedom from hunger. In the same way as one is progressing in surrender, in a very natural, seamless way, there will be devotion, there will be experience of the Absolute, and there will be virakti. The only difference between the surrendering path and the eating is that when you ate enough, you got to stop. But when you're eating with the Absolute Truth, you never stop. You keep going until you drop. Actually, this is a statement in the Bhagavatam. The original conception of drink till you drop came from the Bhagavatam. That was a very enlightening thing to discover when I was reading in Vrindavan. Sri Vishwanath comments on the third verse of the Bhagavatam in the first canto, first chapter, that one should drink the messages of the Bhagavatam through the mouth of one's ears until the state of pralaya manifests. Pralaya is an ecstatic symptom that means to faint. In other words, you should drink till you drop. And then he says, when you get up, you drink some more, and then you drop. And then you get up, you do it again. Like that. So in the same way, this is the only difference between the eating process and the process of bhakti. When you eat too much, you got to stop. Even though the tongue is like, I want more. You got to hold on, boy. You can't take no more. The stomach's about to break. But with devotion, Yashrimvatam Rasagyanam, Sadhu Sadhu, Pade. What is that? What is that, brother? I can't think of the word. Uttamashoka Vikrame. I can't think of the first line. Anyway, the sages are telling Sutta Goswami that we never tired of hearing this message, these topics of Krishna. Yashrimvatan Rasagyanam. Those who are Rasagnanam, they're connoisseurs. They know how to taste the Bhagavatam. Then they're constantly hearing it every step. So that's the only difference between the two. So I don't know if it's something to exactly be thought about in a sort of how you say it? I want to use the word mechanistic, but it's not mechanistic, like a concomitant. Not linear. Compartment, that's closer to what I'm thinking. I can't exactly find the word. Anyway, the idea is just like when a lotus flower blossoms, it does so in a seamless way. It's not like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, it just kind of in a very seamless way blossoms, and it looks very elegant. So in the same way, devotion blossoms in a very seamless sort of way. So which stage what is it about the greatness of Nama? Nama is not different from the spiritual reality. So in a very sense, you go in chanting, hearing like this, and what is it about the greatness? That's another thing also, what is it about the greatness? That will be different actually for different devotees depending on their objective in Krishna consciousness. It is not that it is all the same. The experience of even Krishna consciousness is subjective. It will be different, and especially according to when one is more advanced in the path of bhakti, and as we were hearing, when artha pravritti becomes more important, then you will, different devotees are aspiring after different rasas. So the way they will experience the holy name will be unique. So what is it about the holy name that will be unique to your own, to you as a subjective entity, and it will also blossom in a seamless sort of way. It's not that all things have to be totally talked about in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is also meant to be experienced. Pratyaksha avagamam, direct perception is required. And even though it's direct perception, the experience will be variegated according to the devotee. So what is it about it? You'll know when it comes up. Like Prabhu said, you don't need a certificate like that. You had a second question, but we'll take another one. And then we'll get to it.
To the offering obeisances to the Super Soul, would it also be offering respects to the jiva? Because I guess you can kind of, like you said before, is that like the same category in a way?
You're seeing the jiva is a conscious part of the conscious whole.
Yeah.
The conscious whole is Paramatma. The jiva is a conscious part. So seeing that and understanding that, you also offering respect to the jiva. The idea is that you're seeing the spiritual substratum behind matter. That's the idea. You're not just like that verse, Anisha Sarvabhutana. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. And this is actually just speaking of a person who's gaining realization of Atma, different from matter in context. So what is night for all beings? The spiritual, the spiritual substratum of existence. That is night for them. And what are they awake to? The world of duality. So they're chasing after their raga and dvesha. I like this, I don't like that. That's what they're awake to. And their whole consciousness is consumed by that. Just like when you're dreaming, and you're just awake to that dream world, and that's taking up your whole being. Whereas the self-realized person is awake to the spiritual substratum, and he's asleep to duality. So material bodies are an aspect of the duality manifested before us. So they're asleep to that reality, and they're awake to the spiritual substance underpinning it, and they're offering their respects. You can say it's a real humble.
And I had one more question. So I remember it said that Krishna is the one who originally creates, but I was thinking, well, isn't the material nature eternal? It's just manifests and unmanifests.
Don't be confused by the word creates. Another word that could be used is project. The word srijami, which is often translated as create, is sometimes also translated as projects. And in context of what the question, it sounds like you're asking, then in order to not create confusion, it means projection, because the energy is always eternal. There was no beginning to the world cycles. It was anadi, and Krishna clearly says that in chapter 13 Bhagavad Gita. So then we have to understand that Krishna, when it says create, he just means he projects the world, the super soul, at a certain point, and then retracts it, projects it, retracts it. So that is also true of the jivas, of all of Krishna's energies. So just as Krishna is eternal, all of Krishna's energies are eternal. So he doesn't create any of the energies like this.
I see. Thank you.
All right, Michael.
Hare Krishna. So I was wondering how Lord Brahma came to this conclusion that, Hiranyakashipu came to this conclusion that Lord Brahma is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
I don't know if he really cares. There's some confusion, as I expressed in the class, there's some confusion concerning the ontological position because he hasn't heard about Krishna from the right sources. And also he's envious of Krishna. So there's some confusion. But his concern is not so much about the ontological position of Lord Brahma in relationship to the Absolute. It's about getting boons so he can kill Vishnu. That's what it's all about. So ostensibly it looks like a glorification, but it's just the same old exploitation program going on. That's all that it is.
I got one more question. You said that knowledge of the soul is mode of goodness.
Yeah.
When you mean knowledge, do you mean realization? That realization,
Yeah, realization,
of the soul
perception.
is mode of goodness? I
Yeah.
mean, it's only by the mode of goodness to get realization of soul. I'm just wondering, like, how by something material you can get something spiritual.
Well, it's not as, because the soul is spiritual, and what the mode of goodness is doing is purifying the antakarna, means like the subtle body. So just like a mirror has its natural characteristic of reflecting. But if dust is covering it, that natural characteristic is not perceived. And if you remove the dust, then the inherent nature of the mirror is immediately manifest. So similarly, it's not that by something material you're realizing something spiritual. The soul is already spiritual. By moving the dust from the subtle body, then immediately you start to see your own autonomous nature from matter. Like that, the example often given is like looking through a mirror. So it's not that one is fully free from material nature. So the yogis and the jnanis, they're not above material nature yet. They're just in a high mode of goodness, like extremely high mode of goodness. So that's like seeing the truth through a window. So you can see the truth, but you're still connected to Prakriti. There's still some connection to Prakriti. It's not that something material is giving you a realization of something spiritual. You're already spiritual. By removing the dirt from the window, you can see the truth, like that.
Does it take bhakti to realize the soul?
No, I just said it can be the influence of the Vidya Shakti. It takes some element of bhakti when one primarily follows the path of Gyan. But because all these processes require some help from bhakti to achieve success, then that is called as Bhakti Mishra Gyan. You heard of Gyan Mishra Bhakti, but there's also Bhakti Mishra Gyan. Bhakti Mishra Gyan means when you primarily following like a process like Gyan or karma, but you're taking assistance from bhakti because the shastras say that is required in order to gain the fruit of that particular process. So in that sense, you can say it requires a little bit of bhakti to gain that realization, but not really. All that little bhakti does is allow for the influence of the Vidya Shakti of Maya to manifest, by which you get some enlightenment. Okay, I'm autonomous, I'm different from matter. Like this. Yeah, Mukunda. All right, then.
Hare Krishna. I was trying to think how to word this. I'm not sure if it's a question or just an observation, but I was thinking that like Hiranyakashipu, he did this tapasya, and then when Brahma came in front of him, I mean, he did this tapasya to Brahma knowing that Brahma can give him this power because he's greater than him at that point. And so then when Brahma came, then Hiranyakashipu was exhibiting this false humility. And then I was thinking, in relation to myself at least, I go through this tapasya of hearing, chanting, the whole program, and then a senior devotee comes in front of me, and I offer false humility towards them. Kind of like, I'm thinking like, I think I'm subconsciously thinking, I want to become as great as you, if not greater than you. So like...
Yeah, that's what we're all thinking. No doubt. Yeah, I'm greater. Yeah, so problem. One of the symptoms of offenses, there are 5 according to Jiva Goswami in the Bhakti Sandarbha, and the first one he mentions is crookedness. This is the first, when one's chanting offensively, then he says not a first effect, I don't think it's like exactly an effect as such, like, exactly cause and effect as such, but he says one of the symptoms of an offensive chanter is crookedness. A little crookedness comes up in the heart, and then a lot if it's not checked. So then the tendency to try show one thing before the sadhus with another thing maybe in the heart. But sometimes that sort of thinking is just the force of karma acting upon our psychology. But at our very core, it may be something more genuine. But we just like conditioned in a particular sort of way. In the material world, we're always competing. So I remember when I first joined, the very first year I joined, and I figured out what a sannyasi was, I was like, yeah, I want to be one of them. And what was my thinking? When I walk into the room, everyone will bow down. That's nice. And then you don't have to get up to get your food. They'll bring it to you. And then I'll be instructing everyone very nicely and be glorified in this way. It was just this is like a natural thinking pattern because I'm coming from the material realm, and that's the pattern of thought. So I come into the Sangha of devotees, and I see, oh, that one's getting the most. So I need to get, and then you become a little bit learned. Maybe you're reading a little bit, and then you start to have the problem gets augmented now because now you hear a class, and you was like, oh, he shouldn't have said it like that. Actually, the better way would have, maybe I'll make a comment in the class, in order to help him out a little bit, help further the discussion. Like that's not and that becomes a problem, for example, like this. So that's kind of a natural thinking pattern. At a certain point of the Shravanam process and a little bit of purification, you start to realize the foolishness of the proposition. And at that time, you don't want to be thinking like that, but it comes up because of being conditioned. But at the very core, it might be something more genuine. So my point is that it's not necessarily crookedness in the sense that Jiva Goswami was speaking about it in the Bhakti Sandarbha. But there's definitely some duplicity there. Therefore, before even accepting Guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaks of the necessity of doing sadhu sangha because they will help us to bear the effort of finding out our own insincerities and kind of getting rid of them wholesale. Sadhu sangha is very important for that reason. Like this. I don't know if that answers or if it's a comment or... All right. Luke was going to say something. I finished the discussion at 7:55. I was good today. The class is going on.
Hare Krishna. You were discussing this international, community, whatever kind of community of dupes.
Mutual Admiration Society of Dupes. That's a statement of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta.
So, what's the difference between duplicity and diplomacy?
I guess you can say diplomacy is like a good duplicity.
Well, it's true.
Someone might argue like that.
It's true, yeah, because...
It's like a good duplicity. Of course, yeah, that's another point. It depends on the goal of diplomacy also. That would factor into it. Otherwise, it might just be genuine duplicity. But some diplomacy, like in the case of Vasudeva in the 10th canto, when he's trying to protect Devaki. So his goal was very noble and very high. So then, and he had to employ diplomacy in that situation. So like that.
Just 'cause I'm thinking in my practice, I've noticed that I have kind of like at least a feigned pride in adhering to truth. So then even to like be diplomatic, I've convinced myself in the past that I'm not going to be diplomatic because it's not truthful. But I think that was just a misunderstanding of what is truthfulness, because we hear that truthfulness is speaking in a way that's pleasing and also beneficial. And as you pointed out, like devotees will utilize diplomacy in their service to Krishna. Like it goes on all the time in Krishna's pastimes. So anyway, I was just thinking about that. But it does seem like there's some duping, but I guess it's like transcendental.
Yeah, maybe transcendental duping. Of course, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says, that the truth has to be spoken in the most unambiguous way, not without any concern of time, place, or person. And then he says that path has to be adopted that is least likely to be misunderstood. In our communication with devotees, sometimes there's a tendency because everyone thinks they're adhering to truth. Everyone is more or less thinking that way. Even if and which is overall true also. We're chanting the holy name, we're trying to surrender to Krishna. And there may be some misunderstanding or whatever, but everyone's kind of thinking there. So in our dealings with devotees, we have to give that benefit of the doubt So as not to speak in a way that might end up being very disrespectful, especially when dealing with seniors, which is a tendency. Just like this story Srila Bhaktisiddhanta tells about the old monkey instructing the younger monkeys. Anyway, I don't know all the details of the story right now off the top of my head. I can read it from you. It's from Upakanya Upadesh. But these old monkeys were all the time going to one particular kitchen, enjoying the senses, and where there's some sheep and other things lying around. So the old monkey was telling the younger monkeys that this is not a very good idea. One day what's going to happen is there isn't going to be, before the kitchen fire, one day what's going to happen is that some sheep is going to come into the kitchen, and there's not going to be anyone there to see that the sheep is off. And he's going to have a full set of wool. And because there's nothing like a stick, a goad, to get the sheep out of the room, they're going to use a firebrand. And the sheep's wool is going to catch on fire, and the sheep's going to run into the horse stand, and the horse is going to be badly burned. And the only solution for that is some type of substance that's coming from the monkey's body. So then they're going to kill all of us, and then take that substance to soothe the horses. So that sounds like really fantastic, right? So then the younger monkeys was like, come on, what is this story, Sure enough, one day it happened that they were in the kitchen trying to enjoy their sense gratification, and the sheep came in, and there was no gold to send them out. So the cook in the kitchen grabbed a firebrand, and it was just a few days before it was time to shave all the sheep. So they had the fullest set of hair you can have, and he used a firebrand, and their wool caught on fire. They ran into the horse stand. The horses got severely injured, and the king was like, oh no, what are we going to do? And so the minister said, we need to get this substance from the monkeys. Then we can use it to soothe the horses. They'll be saved. Those that were severely burned, they could be saved. So sure, all the younger monkeys, and by this time the older monkey had left long before, because the younger monkeys were just disrespecting him. So all the younger monkeys were collected. Oh no, he was right. And they all died. So the story, the purport of the story, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, is that seeing the elderly age of the seniors, thinking that they're not hip, they're not onto the new lingo, how to properly express Krishna consciousness, etc., like this, then the tendency may be to disrespect them. Ram Roy Prabhu just read the story to us. That's how it's fresh in my head. I'm just giving I'm giving a certain context. My point is that within such situations, I'm saying this in relationship with my statement of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, that one has to speak in a way that's least likely to be understood. At the same time, we just have to be conscious that others are also adhering to truth, and that there could be some either mutual misunderstanding of the points that are being conveyed and so on. And in that sense, showing some sensitivity to that, which you may also call diplomacy. Just like sometimes when I was in Vrindavan, I felt that I had a right understanding, and I felt something was being spoken that wasn't right. But instead of just saying that it wasn't right, I was like, I need to give the benefit of the doubt. I might be just misunderstanding what he's saying. And so on several occasions, I would just ask, can you reconcile? Because this is my understanding, and I will quote various things saying why I understand something in a particular way. And you were saying like this, and it's contradictory. So can there be some reconciliation? And that way, and I felt it was kind of like a diplomacy, in a certain sense. I didn't just go in, I already thought I was right. But I said, actually, the real truth is, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says that method has to be adopted, not like that, but maybe some diplomacy, but it's like a good diplomacy in that sense. It was sensitivity, that these are persons also adhering to truth to some degree. But then in certain situations, it may not be the case, and one has to just say very straight, something very plainly, something, and it may be misunderstood. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says, one cannot win popularity by speaking or hearing the real truth. So that is also a reality. At the same time, if we adopt, just like he says that the truly humble person, it is his duty, his bounden duty to admonish all those who will do harm to themselves or to others by opposing or genuinely misrepresenting the truth. But then he defines the humble person. He's beyond all competing worldliness. So then, you got to ascertain what's your situation, because then prematurely adopting that may just lead to the inflation of the mind's ego, and then you're caught, although you come out the winner, you're a loser. Just like I was joking like this with devotees in New York, I said, you will say something thinking it's the truth, and then he was like, yeah, I checked him, I showed what the real tattoo was, and it wasn't that was good, right? Like that, and then you find yourself collapsing. You came out the victor, perhaps, in your estimation at battle, but ultimately the loser. So like this, spiritual life is a razor sharp edge, as the Upanishads say. You go this way, you go that way, you can get cut. Like this. Anyway, it's a little bit long-winded answer, but.
It's a small follow-up, if that's okay. I'm wondering, could you reconcile, given that the general public, if we speak Krishna conscious principles, even we speak plainly, they won't understand.
Yeah.
Because
We'll just speak of the public.
there's the need for adhikar.
Yeah.
So it seems this point of speaking unambiguously, one would need to be very, very attentive and conscious of the audience he's speaking to. So could you reconcile that perspective with what the statements of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that you're sharing?
Now your context is in speaking to the public, specifically. Because
Well,
I will answer it from that, or just...
anyone, because their capacity for understanding.
Yeah, so,
It's
it means
personal.
that because they're maybe lacking adhikar for hearing, then anything you speak will be ambiguous. That's what you're saying, basically anything.
Well, not necessarily anything, but especially if I just try to speak what I understand to be the plain Krishna conscious
Yeah, I think
truth.
we reconcile that by saying that the hearing process is a long one. Obviously coming in, it's hard to understand. But it's like, I remember I didn't understand what sense gratification was for 2 years. Like really, and why it was like so much condemned and all that. 2 years is after I joined. Then I finally asked devotees. Well, I asked devotees in the very beginning what is sense gratification. I didn't know what it was. So they told me what it was. I was like, that's natural. That's like, and after all these years of doing Krishna consciousness, I realized that I was right. It is natural. Sense gratification is totally natural for the conditioned souls. But it took me 2 years to realize why it was a problem. Like, I understood theoretically. I was reading Prabhupada's books very diligently, sometimes 3, 4, 5 hours in a day. But I wasn't really clear. It was ambiguous why it was an issue. 2 years later, it came, I had some realization. I saw some news things, and then I connected why those things were happening. I was like, oh, sense gratification is bad. It was like a light bulb moment. So I think we reconcile by saying the hearing process is a long one. The topics are generally ambiguous, Even one little point is, just like the point you're not this body, is really hard to, it has so many manifestations. Actually, in most of the first 9 cantos of Bhagavatam, you're hearing a lot of different angles of you're not this body. That's basically what we're hearing. And so it's a deep touch with a kind of understanding. It's not even the highest thing. It's a very kind of low thing, relatively speaking. And it's very difficult. Yeah, that's another thing, yeah. When you're reading the first, chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, especially in chapter 5 and 4, you start to see, because it's talking about a Nishkarma Karma Yogi in context, and you see that he just becomes callous. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada's purports, so that we don't come to that sort of conclusion. Otherwise, by reading that, you're like, okay, everything's the modes of nature, it's all material, I don't want to have anything to do with material, so you just become callous. So yeah, it takes some time. We reconcile the ambiguity by giving ourselves patience in the hearing process. Prabhupada used that language also in the first canto. One has to hear patiently from the right source. Yeah.
You gave your example about asking about a truth that you had a contradictory understanding. I would say that's not being diplomatic, but it's being straightforward, because you're presenting your feelings on it in a very straightforward way, instead of just blatantly saying some.
Offer our patience.
Try. And I was reading in the Bhagavatam of.
I'm scared. Oh, you go pause for a second. Are you gonna get in front? He was waiting.
understand Guru Jap. Speaking about, people can't understand when we're trying to explain Krishna consciousness, and they don't just, I think that's what Prabhupada's biggest weapon is, the Guru Japa.
Okay, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Okay. And I was reading in the Bhagavatam that simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. But if we have these impurities, this false ego, we can't be straightforward. We're forced to be, diplomatic because we think we have to present ourselves in a certain way or in that way or this way.
You're not forced necessarily, but you may, like I was saying to Dr. Luke, you might prematurely take what you deem to be a simple position and end up the loser by becoming proud. So it's a razor sharp edge when one is immature in Christian consciousness. Just like even that one statement, that is one statement, but life is not so black and white. Life is very nuanced. So I already gave an example. Vasudev, he had to be diplomatic with Kamsa. He should have been so straightforward. You're just a demon. You're going to hell. If you cut her head off, you definitely, that wouldn't have worked. So there was some diplomacy there. So you'll find that life is nuanced. So even with those sorts of statements, you got to take them in relationship to a whole reality. And that way, there's no substitute for maturity in Krishna consciousness.
And just one last point, I was thinking when you said to let him understand, that you just seek to understand is truly being straightforward rather than trying to manipulate the situation for your own perspective. So I think that if we try to understand someone else and help them understand us, that's being straightforward. But if we just try to propound our own view without trying to understand them or helping them understand us.
What do you mean by them?
Like just a party that's having a conflict. If you partake in diplomacy, I would think that as trying to propound some view against their own, will, basically. But
are you thinking like in a community of devotees or
like
conflict resolution sort of idea?
Yeah, like diplomacy usually happens in these communities. And someone who's not trying to understand, but to try to push something, that's what I consider diplomacy. But something that's like trying to understand both parties from like a detached view, that's being straightforward.
I have a lot of opinions about this, but I will not go into details here. I think both parties should be more concerned about trying to understand Krishna and Krishna Tattva, by which conflict can be easily reconciled. I think one of the main problems that tends to happen in our communities is that we don't do enough Sankirtan, Shravanam and Kirtanam, together. So that leaves so much room for a conflict to rise up. Mostly we're into just socially, we're interested in socially viable religious life, which involves a sense of belongingness to something greater than yourself. So that's the institution gives you that facility, a sense of belongingness, which is very wonderful because it's connected to Krishna. But then within that, we take advantage of the social situation, and it may not be Krishna conscious. So if there was more of the actual application of the process in the form of, more and more Shravanam and Kirtanam, means that you cannot do 24 hours kirtan, your voice will go out. So when you're not, then you have to continue the kirtan by Hari Katha. And that way you give no room for this sort of misunderstanding, practically no room. There's still misunderstanding will rise, but then such enlightened persons will be able to easily reconcile themselves. It won't be very difficult. Otherwise, if you could try to get into, I'll try to understand you, okay, you try to understand me. There's no end to that. Our psychologists are so perverted. In your attempt to do it that way, you'll say one sentence or one word in a sentence, and they'll pick up on that one word and say, and their heart will be pinched by that one word. You had no intention. And that way, it'll be probably no end of let's try to understand you, and you try to understand me. And it'll just be going on ad infinitum. We have to try to understand Krishna. I had a conflict with a devotee here about 2 years ago, and he was writing me these really heavy mails about my being duplicitous and this and that, based on a misunderstanding. So I shared with him, I said, the way you're saying is not correct. It is like this. And then he was like, nah, and then he wrote me another heavy mail. So I went back and forth. I wrote him another mail. Then he wrote me another one. And I wrote him, I said, Prabhu, life is too short for this. If you can't give me the benefit of the doubt as a neophyte devotee trying to make progress, then what can I do? Hare Krishna. You know, our business is not to go on fighting like this ad infinitum. I have more opinions about that, but that's another topic altogether, is conflict resolution, social. Anything else about the class? Well, we already did 40 minutes of questions and answers, so we'll stop here. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. So we have His Grace Jananivas Prabhu here from Mayapur. His Grace Radha Jivan Prabhu, Sunanda Prabhu, and Braja Vilas Prabhu, and Radha Jivan Prabhu's daughter, Rukmini Mataji. Welcome to Kishore Kishori's house. So we've arranged for a cloth here because we're going to bring Lord Nityananda's shoes in. So can we all go do kirtan and invite the shoes in, keep them here, take darshan, touch them on our head, etc. Okay? So please, let's do kirtan and let's go and bring the shoes.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hey y'all, don't forget to turn. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Hare Ram Ram. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram Shri Nityananda Prabhu ki Shri Prabhupada ki Gaura Premanande.
Thank you so much for this wonderful ecstatic reception that you have given. As you say, Lord Nityananda Prabhu, in the form of his own padukas from Sridham Mayapur, is traveling all over North America in celebration, in commemoration of the wonderful works of Srila Prabhupada in North America. And this morning, we had no idea we were coming to the temple. We had engagements in another town, but the Lord couldn't wait to come and take darshan of Sri Sri Kishore Kishori and meet with all of you devotees. These are the ways of the Lord. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he says in one place, Kon kon karjo tumi koro kon dware, tumi na janaile keo janite na pare. What activities you do at whose doorstep, we do not know. Unless you make it revealed to us, only then we can find out. So this is something completely unplanned. We had no idea so many ecstatic brahmachari devotees are living here in the temple, and that the lordships would be received by all of you. And also I want to mention, we have traveled to 20 cities already. This is our 23rd temple we are visiting. And here in Chicago, the Lordship Sri Sri Nityananda and Nrishingadev, they were received by tears in the eyes of our temple president Nityananda Pran. So with such ecstasy, he felt the ecstasy and presence of Lord Nityananda as soon as we arrived here. So we feel very grateful, and in great gratitude we come to your doorstep to speak about our mission in Sridham Mayapur, which we will be presenting tomorrow evening. And thank you once again. Hare Krishna. And thank you, Nityananda Prabhu. Hare Krishna.